I always wonder what it's like for my parents to see their kids living their lives. And then I look at my daughter and my son, and I realize this does get transferred from one generation to the next. We have that word nachas, nachat, which really can't be translated to joy. It's something that we feel in every fiber of our beings and our bodies when we see the extraordinary lives that we're blessed to usher into and through this world. I want to tell you stories and questions. And maybe the questions are more important than the stories. We have a tradition, a long tradition, of questions being more important than answers. We know the Jewish tradition, Fiddler on the Roof, the Talmud, is that you answer a question with another question. But first I want to tell you a story. And the story is a story that I told. I was given 2.5 minutes to make a speech at my ordination at Stephen S.Y. Synagogue, Temple. And I shared this story. And the story was a story that I heard in Uganda told by a Kenyan woman about an old Russian priest. So maybe that in itself is a story. It tells us something about this world in which we're living. And the story was that this old Russian priest is walking at night in the forest. And suddenly a soldier comes up to him holding a gun, and he holds it to his chest, and he asks the man, "Who are you? What are you doing here, and where are you going?" And the old man stops, and he breathes, and he listens. And he looks at the young man holding the gun to his chest, and he says, "How much do they pay you to ask me these questions?" And the soldier tells him a number of kopecks that he's earning. And the old man says to him, "I'll give you double if every time you see me, you ask me those same 3 questions. Who are you? What are you doing here? And where are you going?" Yom Kippur is, in a sense, a sacred soldier sent once a year to accost you, to stop you in your tracks, to shock you into thinking differently, deeper. It asks you, who are you? What are you doing here? And where are you going? Yom Kippur reminds us through our clothing, through the fasting, that we're here for something in particular. And one of the things it does through fasting, through this purification, this ritual fire, is allows us to see through a lens of clarity and sanctity who we might be, and who we have been, and who we hope will be. In Judaism, we ask, who are you? And it means something that it does different than it does in our secular lives. When you ask somebody, particularly in my age of life, who are you? They generally answer a name and then a profession. I am a producer. Oh, what do you produce? I'm a real estate agent. What kind of houses? Commercial or private, residential? I'm a mom who takes care of her kids and goes from orthodontist appointment to soccer practice to school to doctors. And the person says, "I need to get a toothpick. I'll be right back." It doesn't come back. Who are we that's more interesting than what we do? I remember a story, an embarrassing story that I'll share with you from my own life. And it was a wedding that I conducted at the Beverly Hills Hotel 15, 16, 17 years ago. My brother's doing this. And the story was that I did this wedding, and after the wedding, we had a private reception in one of the private rooms of the hotel, and I sat down next to this young guy, and I turned to him, and he knew who I was because I just conducted a wedding for his friends. And I asked him, "Who are you?" And he told me his name, and I asked the inevitable next question that you ask of somebody in his 30s. I asked, "What do you do?" And he said, fatefully, he said, "I make movie posters." And I said, "Oh, unfortunately, I had an opinion." I said, "Those really have an impact on me." I said, "I have to tell you, a movie poster sometimes will determine whether or not I'll actually see a movie. They're that powerful." I thought I was complimenting him. And he says, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I'll tell you what. There's actually a movie poster now that I can't even look at." And I said, "And I'm not going to see the movie because of that poster." I said, it may sound wrong, when I drive by on Olympic Boulevard, I know it's on a bus stop, I look away, and he says to me, what is the poster look like? And I say, I don't even know, I don't look at it. He said, what movie is it for? I said, I don't know, I don't look at it. I'm so repulsed by the poster. That's how powerful they are. And he says, well, what do you remember of it? I said, it's some green, black, swirling thing. And I said, it's something about Las Vegas, and it's with Johnny Depp. And he said, oh, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I said, yeah, that's what it is. He said, I did that one. Which is why my brother is holding his head in his hands. In Judaism, when we ask what you do, we're asking a very different question. On Yom Kippur, when a prayer book asks, who are you and what do you do? It's asking, what do you do for others? What do you do for this community? What do you do for the world? What do you do for the state of Israel? What do you do to continue the story of the Jewish people? What do you do that's about striving and studying and learning and bettering yourself? What do you do that defines who you are beyond your work or your retirement or your childhood? You see, Yom Kippur asks us to think about who we are through a lens that we don't use the rest of the year because we're so busy doing. And yet there are times when our tradition asks us to stop and stop and stop, to take a Shabbat, to rest from doing, to realize what we're doing, to question if the doing defines us, to question actually what does define us. If you turn on the television or you open a magazine, you'll see questions asked on every page. The question, what do you wear? The question, what do you drive? The question, what do you own? There's a Jewish version of each of those questions. What do you wear in the synagogue on Yom Kippur is white. And the reason that we wear white isn't for purity, that was Rosh Hashanah. It's because it's a death shroud. We wear white on Yom Kippur because this is what the rabbis designed as a shocking near-death experience. Denying ourselves the comforts of food that is life, of color that is life, and wrapping ourselves in what every one of us one day will be enwrapped in. The rabbis want us to have this shock to our system, to awaken ourselves to what might be, if God willing, we journey from this place to life, in life. The Jewish answer to what drives you is different. What do you drive? We ask ourselves, what drives you? What drives you when you wake up in the morning saying, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam? I bow my head before the master and creator of my life that allowed me the potential that fills this day. What will I do with it that will define me and help me to answer the question of who am I? What drives me on a day-to-day basis as a father and as a husband and as a rabbi and as a member of your community and their community and a member of this world? What is it? Is it ego or amassing wealth and filling pockets and homes with stuff? Or is it filling life with meaning and purpose and learning and knowledge and even wisdom? And if the magazine asks, what do you own? And the television and every ad gives a version of that question, what do you own? Yom Kippur asks a different question. It says, what owns you? To what have you given the power to possess your life? To what addiction? To what habit? To what predilection? To what pattern? What is it that's owned you for a year? What is it that's taken hold of who you are and not allowed you to release the pure soul that God gave you to live the life that your potential is, that you've been blessed with? Do you remember the story from the Talmud, the story of Reb Zusia? Zusia, when he's getting old, speaks to his students, his disciples, and they ask him questions. And he says, the question that perplexes me the most isn't that God will ask me, Zusia, why were you not more like Abraham? Why were you not more like Jacob or Moses? He said, what compels me is that God will ask me, Zusia, why in all those years were you not more like Zusia? That's the story that Yom Kippur asks us. I looked at that story of the old Russian priest, and he may have been a rabbi, even a Hasidic rabbi, because that story serves so much like Hasidic tales. And Hasidim, the rabbis, found themselves in forests in so many occasions. And I looked at the story and I realized there might be something important about the age of the man. It's an old man wandering in a forest. And he says, I'll employ you at an age in which I'm not employed, but I'll employ you to ask me the most vital questions about who I am. Who in this important age of my life today, who at this stage in my journey am I? And what am I doing here? And where am I going? If you look in the Torah, you realize that life doesn't seem to begin until after retirement. Nobody knows Moses for being a good shepherd. Nobody. There's no account in the Torah of how skillful he was at watching sheep. It's irrelevant to us. Abraham we didn't hear anything about until he reached an elderly year. Moses, Jacob was blind. Isaac was crippled. All of these sages, all of these heroes of ours became heroic and exemplary and extraordinary when they were no longer defined by what they do, but instead by who they are. So the beginning of our story, the rabbis tell us, is that we began as souls coming into this world, not yet with professions or knowledge or education, not yet with jewelry or cars or houses to define who we are. We were simply innate, divine human beings. And then we came into a world of asiyah, a world of doing, and we thought that the doing would ultimately give us an identity, and it did. And for many of us, it's an identity that's worthy of our daily breath and life. But at the same time, even as a rabbi or a teacher or a principal or a physician or an attorney or a mother or a father, we have to stop at least once on this holiday and say, but ultimately, when I close my eyes and I'm alone only for one day with God, when I tell the people in the rows next to me, tonight, I resign for 25 hours. Let me be me without obligation so that I can find who I actually am. Let me not for these 24 hours be your husband or your rabbi or your parent or your child. I need to pull the talit over my head for 24 hours so that I can find me, so that ultimately I could be of more meaning and use to you. Our story is filled with questions. Every period should be a question mark. Remember that when we find the Torah, we don't find any punctuation. So the scribes and the rabbis have to interpret when a comma should come and when a question mark should come and when a period should come. But imagine if Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad wasn't a statement, but it was a question. A question that compelled us every day of our lives. Is there God and is there oneness in this world? And might I actually hear the words that I say as a habitual pattern of my Jewish life? Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is God's world. Is it? With all that we've done to it and all that we continue to do in it? I sometimes wonder if periods become question marks and if prayers of human beings are actually God's prayers to us. That God says, bow your knees, your head, bend your knees, prostrate yourself before an ark, somehow an image of me in your world, so that you can find humility, so you can find gratitude. Close your eyes when you say Shema, not so that you can find me, but ultimately so that you can find the oneness of you that is within me in this world that is one. When it says, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, I don't know how to love God because God is amorphous and unknowable and transcendent and immanent at the same time. But when I look to you and I realize that God placed you, B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God in this world, then I know what love is. And then I realize what is divine. Questions are divine doors opening to our hearts and to our souls. I reminded you last week that the rabbis saw the word lev not as heart but as mind. So today we have to ask ourselves, is Yom Kippur a celebration of atonement of our hearts, or is it an atonement of our minds? Is this the day in which we marry our heart and our mind to pray and to cry and to weep and to laugh and to sing and to make yisco and remembrance for loved ones and for ourselves, for those parts of us that we don't care to take into a new year. Every one of us has questions that we brought through the door. Some of us ask, is there an afterlife? Will I find out during this service? Some of us ask, is there life and does it have a meaning at this point in my life? Some of us ask, does anybody in this story share my experience? Does anybody in my row have the same pains and struggles that I do? Does anybody in this room truly understand and care about me? And when we stand together and we put our arms around each other, and we look to each other and we smile and we sing Zochrenu and Avinu Malkeinu and Hashivenu, we're giving an answer to that question. We're saying yes. Let's come to understand one another. Let's come to realize questions that all of us have, that's part of this human story that's so divine and so challenging. Remember, the most known question to Jews is from Passover. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Why is this night different from any other night? Well, that's the question of Yom Kippur, the question to go home with. Why is this night and this day and this holiness, this time of presence, this time of realization, this time of self-awareness, of knowledge, as Isaiah says, of pegging our stakes deeper and widening of our tents, of coming to realize who we are? Why is this different? And what might be different as I exit this holiday back into the world of doing? Hillel said, so famously and so beautifully, a question that becomes an answer to this sermon. He said, if I'm not for myself, who is for me? And if I'm only for myself, what am I? And if not now, then when? K'mar Chatima Tova.